Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlights India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty at the G20 in Brazil. Also calls for addressing the challenges faced by the Global South countries. On the sidelines of the G20 Summit in Rio, Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds bilateral meetings with Indonesian President Subianto. Also talks to the Portuguese Prime Minister Luis Montenegro. Sri Lanka gets a new cabinet strengthening President Dissanayaka's mandate to give the country a fresh start. Dissanayaka to visit India soon, confirms his new foreign minister. Reports say that COP29 is reaching a fragile consensus on climate finance, and the countries are urged to take up this matter at the G20 Summit in Rio. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is attending the G20 Leaders Summit in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was welcomed by the Brazilian President Lula Silva at the venue, which is the Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro. Prime Minister also met the US President Joe Biden at the summit. Earlier, the Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva opened the summit of the G20, that's the group of 20 major economies, on Monday with the launch of the Global Alliance to Combat Poverty and Hunger, which he called the result of political decisions. Lula said that the devastating effects of climate change are to be seen all around the world, and he urged leaders to have the courage to act. As G20 Summit is underway in Rio de Janeiro, leaders have gathered for the group photo also. They had gathered some time ago for the Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced India's support, in fact, for this Brazilian initiative for a global alliance against hunger and poverty, and called the step an important step towards the implementation of the Deccan high-level principles for food security adopted at the New Delhi Declaration, the New Delhi Summit. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro. In Brazil, the Prime Minister spoke about India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty, sharing India's success story. Prime Minister Modi said that the main reason for India's success is the approach of back to basics and march to the future.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The Prime Minister spoke on a number of issues, including India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty, amplifying the concerns of the Global South, push for sustainable development goals. The Prime Minister said that the people-centric decisions taken at the G20 summit in New Delhi have been taken forward during Brazil's presidency. The Prime Minister expressed satisfaction over prioritizing SDG goals. The Prime Minister said that India focused on inclusive development, women-led development, and youth power, and gave wings to the hopes and aspirations of the Global South. The Prime Minister noted that it is clear that one Earth, one family, one future is as relevant at this summit as it was last year. The Prime Minister also shared India's experiences and success stories. He said that over the last 10 years, India lifted 250 million people out of poverty. while over 800 million people are being given food grains free of cost. 550 million people are benefiting from the world's biggest health insurance scheme. Now, 60 million senior citizens over the age of 70 will also be able to benefit from free health insurance. Maintaining a focus on women led development and social inclusion, over 300 million women micro entrepreneurs have been linked to banks and given access to credit. Under the world's largest crop insurance scheme, over 40 million farmers have received benefits worth 20 billion US dollars. Under the farmer scheme, assistance worth over $40 billion has been given to 110 million farmers. Institutional credit worth 300 billion US dollars is being given to farmers. India is not only ensuring food security but also focusing on nutrition. The Saksham Anganwadi and Nutrition 2.0 campaign, which is an integrated nutrition support program, focuses in particular on nutrition for pregnant women, newborn babies, children under the age of 6, and adolescent girls. Through the midday meal scheme, special attention is also being paid to the nutritional needs of school going children. The Prime Minister said that India is also contributing to global food security. India provided humanitarian assistance to Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe recently. The Prime Minister noted that the main reason for our success is our approach back to basics and march to the future. PM Modi remarked that we have focused not only on natural farming and organic farming, but also on new technologies. Besides, India also focused on sustainable agriculture, protection of the environment, nutrition, and food security by promoting Shri Ann or millets. India developed more than 2,000 climate resilient crop varieties and has started the Digital Agriculture Mission. India's digital public infrastructure enables social and financial inclusion. Besides, India created a new model for inclusive development that strengthens the weakest link with the aspirational districts and blocks project. The Prime Minister also said that India supports Brazil's initiative for a global alliance against hunger and poverty. This is an important step towards the implementation of the Deccan High Level Principles for Food Security adopted at the New Delhi Summit. The Prime Minister also highlighted the concerns of the Global South, saying that the countries of the Global South are most adversely impacted by the food, fuel, and fertilizer crises caused by global conflicts. He said that discussions can only be successful when we keep in mind the challenges and priorities of the Global South. And just as we amplify the voice of the Global South by granting permanent membership of G20 to the African Union during the New Delhi Summit, we will reform institutions of global governance. With input from Gautam Roy in Brazil, Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India.
And on the sidelines of the G20 Summit, Prime Minister Narendra Modi held bilateral talks with the Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto in Rio. In October this year, Subianto had taken office as Indonesia's 8th president, vowing to revive the country's economy, combat inequality and corruption, and to be a good neighbor to the world. India and Indonesia share 2 millennia-old close cultural and commercial contacts. Indonesia has emerged as India's largest trading partner in the ASEAN region. The total bilateral trade during the fiscal year 2022-23 was around $38.85 billion. India is an attractive destination for Indian investment. Indian companies have made significant investments in infrastructure, power, textiles, steel, automotive, mining, banking, and consumer goods sectors. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also held bilateral talks with his Portuguese counterpart, Luis Montenegro. And India and Portugal enjoy a strong and amicable political relationship. Economic cooperation between India and Portugal has broadened significantly in key areas such as renewable energy, infrastructure, IT, defense, textiles, tourism, and agriculture. Portugal has consistently supported India's permanent membership in the United Nations Security Council and the Nuclear Suppliers Group. The world's leaders are in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 Leaders Summit, where discussions on climate, trade and global security are dominating the agenda. With high stakes, degrading climate as well as rising tensions, decisions taken here, in fact, could shape the future of the world. Let's take a closer look at the agenda.
All eyes are now on Rio de Janeiro as the G20 Leaders Summit kicks off on Monday. Over the next 2 days, the leaders of the world's largest economies will meet to tackle critical issues from poverty alleviation and combating hunger to institutional reforms, aiming to shape the future of our planet. The G20 nations represent 85% of the global economy and are key contributors to multilateral development banks. Leaders will focus on themes like climate finance, trade, and international security. Decisions made here will have a ripple effect on billions of lives worldwide. Climate change remains a contentious topic at the summit. Diplomatic tensions flared over global warming, with sources indicating that G20 nations reached a fragile consensus on climate finance, a point that has eluded recent UN talks in Azerbaijan. As the COP29 summit in Baku works on mobilizing climate funding, G20 leaders in Rio hold the critical financial tools needed to address the crisis.
And I have come to Rio with a simple message. G20 leaders must lead. And G20 countries, by definition, have tremendous economic clout and they yield massive diplomatic leverage. They must use it to tackle key global problems.
On Saturday, UN climate chief called on G20 leaders to prioritize climate finance, urging them to increase grants for developing nations and advance reforms in multilateral development banks. Amidst these discussions, US policy under President-elect Donald Trump casts uncertainty over trade and security. While outgoing US President Joe Biden has approved Ukraine's use of long-range US missiles against Russia, President-elect Trump pledges major policy shifts, including potential talks to address the Ukraine conflict and new tariffs, signaling a high-stakes shift in global diplomacy. Concerns over a US China trade war are likely to fuel intense trade talks at the summit. As the G20 summit begins in Rio, leaders face mounting pressure to deliver solutions on climate, trade, and global security. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, Sri Lanka's newly appointed 21-member cabinet took oath on Monday before President Anura Kumara Dissanayake at the Presidential Secretariat. Harini Amarasuriya and Vijitha Herath, they retained their portfolios as Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, respectively. And Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister has said that the President is going to be visiting India mid-December probably, during which time he will hold discussions with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Here's the report.
As Sri Lanka's newly appointed cabinet of ministers took oath on Monday at the Presidential Secretariat in Colombo, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake retained the key defence and finance portfolios after sweeping the snap parliamentary elections last week. The leftist leader Dissanayake confirmed the interim cabinet ministers along with Prime Minister Harini Amarasuriya and Foreign Minister Vijit Herath, who all retained their respective portfolios. In addition, Harini Amarasuriya will also be the Minister of Education, Higher Education and Vocational Studies. Other key appointments include Bimal Rathanayake, who has been assigned the portfolio of Transport, Highways and Civil Aviation, while Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa has been given the charge of Health and Media. The new government will hold its first parliamentary sitting on Thursday to elect the Speaker of the House. Dissanayake is expected to present his key policy priorities to the newly appointed lawmakers.
The most important thing, this power comes with accountability. On one side, it is accountability to the people. On the other hand, it is being responsible to our movement. Therefore, whatever power that was given to us, whether in the constitution or by law, when we use this power, we must be responsible to the people and the movement.
Meanwhile, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has congratulated his Sri Lankan counterpart Vijitha Herath on his reappointment. With Ahmed Muin Farooqi, Ayushi Bhatnagar for DD India.
Now, still to come here on DD India Live, A US envoy is expected to be in Beirut, and this is to bring about a ceasefire. India is also projected to be the fastest growing economy among the G20 countries which are meeting in Rio. India is to grow at 7% GDP as expected in 2024.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked, we just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India. You're watching DD India Live. I'm Mark Lynn. Updates now from West Asia, and a senior Lebanese official has confirmed on Monday that a US envoy is set to visit Lebanon on Tuesday for discussions on a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. So this visit is led by the White House envoy Amos Hochstein, and he's expected to build on the US's ceasefire proposal, which was submitted to Lebanon last week. However, the visit has not officially been confirmed by Washington, D.C. So as far as Beirut is concerned, it is reportedly supportive of Washington's efforts to bring an end to this conflict. But the Lebanese government is seeking, some revisions to the proposal because they want to know how to monitor a potential truce. The United States' decision to authorize long-range Ukrainian strikes, it could help Kiev defend that foothold in Russia's Kursk region that it has, so that, it may be able to leverage some sort of room in talks post-war. But the analysts feel that this is little too late, in fact, and it can't change the course of the war. The Kremlin has called this decision by the United States reckless because Russia has been saying time and again, that this is an escalation and it's a confrontation with NATO. Here's the report from Europe, in fact, from the Europe's point of view. From the European point of view, Rahul Upadhyay gives us the report.
As the Russia-Ukraine conflict nears its 1,000th day, both sides continue to engage in fierce military operations, while global diplomatic efforts intensify to address the escalating crisis. The prolonged war has become an increasingly complex.
We're going to cross now once again to Rio de Janeiro and another bilateral meeting. Prime Minister Narendra Modi with the Prime Minister of Norway, Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre. In fact, Norway is participating in G20 at the invitation of Brazil. It's one of the guest countries. But Norway, of course, is also an important country in Europe, though it's not a member actually of the EU, but it is an important member of Europe, and it's a member of NATO. And relations between India and Norway have been good. In fact, the two nations have maintained a strong relationship. Of course, we do know that India has been looking to have closer relations with the Nordic countries. It's a long-standing relationship in business as well. They've been promoting business cooperation, which is one of the strong objectives of the relationship. It's built on that.